Brian Powell of I Run Far here with Scott Jurek in Salt Lake City after your record-breaking run of the Appalachian Trail. Congratulations on that, Scott.
Oh, thanks. It was quite the adventure.
I bet. I mean, you've been running for 2+ decades. Does anything come even close to the adventure level of the AT?
Nothing, at least in my career,
Yeah.
has ever come close to that. I mean, just the amount of physical, mental, and even beyond, like, what it required. In some ways didn't surprise me because I knew what an endeavor it was, but it also just, just nothing else compares. It was amazing.
I'm sure beforehand you tried to wrap your head around what it would be like and what the experience would be like. Was it anything like what you thought it would be?
Somewhat. You know, I've crewed for David Horton for 2 weeks when he did his Pacific Crest Trail, FKT, and I've definitely, student of the sport, read a ton about, FKTs as well as like adventure / through hikes and runs, and always just been mesmerized by, the through hiking culture too. I'm somebody who loves to backpack and spend time doing section hikes. Jenny and I have done a lot of time on the Pacific Crest Trail, and so just have really had the utmost respect for all those who've come before me and like read as much as I could, but you still can't prepare for everything. I mean, because that's the cool aspect of it, the adventure and just the adversity as well as challenges that are going to pop up, and you just never know what's going to be around the corner.
I mean, what is the adversity? Is it figuring out like acute problem solving, or is it just dealing with weather? What were the biggest challenges out there?
I think you're doing like acute situations that come up, but then you also have these like ongoing things. For me, like one of the biggest challenges was 7 days in, I had some patellofemoral pain that was really irritating me, and that just progressively got worse. And then I'm like compensating on my other side, and my quad gets a significant tear. I've never had, I've had light strains before mid-run or training and racing, but this was like so painful. So basically I have 2 bad legs. I'm no longer able to even limp, and so like I'm trying to get down the trail, and that at that point, 7 days in, I thought this is over. There's no way. How am I going to continue with 2 bad legs, and how is this injury going to recover and still stay on record pace? So that was probably one of the biggest challenges. But there's small like mini challenges along the way, like the weather and the sleep. Day-to-day sleep deprivation towards the end was just mind-boggling for me. Like I had never experienced that before in my career, and it was like a totally new experience. And then little things pop up. It's like you're dealing with little like injuries that you're trying to manage. They're not serious like the ones I had initially, but little things come up. It's like you take falls, and you're bruised, and it's just,
and then you're compensating, and
you're just beat up. So it really strips you down to the core. And I think I had heard that, and people would tell me you'll go through challenges like you've never seen before, and you'll be a changed person. And all those things came true, but no matter what you read and how much you prepare for it and research, you just got to go with it. And I think that's what I love about the sport too.
Yeah, I mean, having just gone through the Hard Rock experience, like that changes you. Like, how many times have you had those experiences in ultra running where you go through this new challenge and come out the other side a different person?
Yeah, and realizing like, wow, I'm stronger than I thought I was, and like it never ceases to amaze me. I mean, I think that's the biggest thing I've learned on this experience and trip and adventure was, I would think like, okay, I've kind of reached that point where like nothing would amaze me, but like I'm blown away that I could get through something like that, and the potential for the human body and the mind and all the things that we can deal with. And I mean, we still can give a little bit more.
Did that happen to you, like your the first Great Western States or setting the 24-hour record? Like, did you ever have that same feeling?
I think so. I definitely, early in my career, maybe you don't appreciate it on the same level. Like for me, I was still, young. I was a 25-year-old when I first won Western States, and like you're just really trying to like tweak all the little nuances of the run and your strategy and your nutrition. And so for me, I didn't really think of things on such a larger scale. Whereas the 24-hour, that at that point in my career, I was like, wow, I got through that, and then at 18 hours, I thought I'm done and I'm finished. And then on the Appalachian Trail, there was like so many days where I'm like, why am I doing this? This is stupid. I could be home now.
So how do you get through the why am I doing this moments? Because there had to be not just in, like, in a day. I'm sure there's a day where you're just like the whole day.
Yeah, it just comes up, and I think the biggest thing is recognizing that's the normal reaction. Having emotional reactions to adversity or down moments or those valleys and low points, but trying to spin those in the other direction. And I think that's what's really key is it's okay to feel demoralized. It's okay to feel like you can't go on, but you have to start thinking about, why am I here? What's most important to me? Use the draw of, getting to Katahdin, getting to the finish line as, I guess, a motivator. Mm-hmm. And then how can I break it down into smaller chunks? So if I start thinking I still have 2,000 miles to go, or I still have 1,000 miles, even halfway, I have 1,100 miles to go. Mm-hmm. It's breaking things down into smaller, manageable goals. And once you do that, it helps take your mind off. But the thoughts are going to creep up.
Yeah.
And then I remember too, I want that adventure. And as much as the pain, the struggle is something that doesn't seem natural, because it isn't.
Yeah.
We're doing these things, and
you're doing it by choice.
You don't have to do them. You can stop at any point, but there's something drawing you inside, and that's when I use motivators. I would remember my mother had passed away, and I remember the fact that she couldn't, move a lot of parts of her body or any part of her body towards the end of her life, and I'm able to run. I'm able to move my body. Yeah, I hurt. Yeah, I've got some things to deal with, but overall, I'm alive and overall pretty healthy.
Did you have any other motivators like that, things you could draw on when you were starting to go that dark place to sort of
I think
pull yourself out?
Jenny was a huge motivator for me too. She's gone through some health things over the year, and just recently had a miscarriage, and so I definitely drew on how strong she had been through that process, and just kind of realizing life gets tough and throws us curveballs and challenges we have to deal with, and just using her as inspiration. And then other people who came out on the trail too. It was, at times it was crazy, both for Jenny, who's managing the crew aspects, but people were really supportive, and I think that was really unique. It was a interesting component to this adventure that you don't typically have somebody, or much less have 20, 30 people running with you at a time. But it also kind of took my mind off of how bad I was hurting, and people, I'd ask them sometimes, an individual was a forester and they tell me about the trees, and I'd be like, hey, does anybody know about the history of the area? I wasn't into all the time, focusing on questions they had. I'd also, hey, you guys talk for a little bit, because I'm pretty tired right now.
Did they understand that? Because you were being self-centered at that moment, but understandably so.
I think, and they
distract
got it.
me.
Yeah, they totally got it, I think, for the most part.
Yeah.
And for a lot of people, it was a unique experience for all of us, and it was a bit strange, because most of the time, in a race, it's not like you have people join you at any point.
Yeah.
And this was a 46-day endeavor, but it did help me just kind of, again, whether somebody was like, hey, Scott, you motivated me, I started running, or I got off the couch and I've lost 50 pounds, and just that little story would inspire me to kind of press forward. And they sometimes come out to the trail and not even run, they would just be out there to cheer. So cool. that was a cool aspect of the.
And did you ever think carrying that forward, you've inspired somebody to get off the couch or do this, get in better shape, that by doing the 18, maybe setting an FKT, you would do the same again and have another bit of inspiration?
Yeah, and whether or not for me, I was going to finish no matter what. I was going to get to Katahdin. Well, not maybe no matter what, but pretty close. If I had to crawl there, I was going to do it. But the record, that was always in the balance. Never knew. But for a lot of people, a lot of times I didn't get to read social media, didn't have time out there. And Jenny she'd read me some people's, comments, and that did, inspire me on, and know that people are like, hey, you're inspiring me. And that's something most of the time, 20 years ago, we weren't able to have that live. You're inspiring me.
Some
right
pats
now
on the back
as you're out there. And so it definitely spurred me on to know that people were not only just psyched and motivated and following me, and kind of getting that experience of the play-by-play action, but they were actually inspired at that moment, and that helped me continue too.
Well, what inspired you to get out there in the first place?
For me, it was just the history. I've always wanted to do a whether you call it a through hike, multi-day adventure, and I knew at some point I would do one of the national scenic trails, and just the history behind the Appalachian Trail really inspired. Part of it too, I'd never been on the Appalachian Trail besides JFK, the 15 miles or 14 miles, 8 miles in Pennsylvania, a few miles in Virginia with David Horton, and I think was there one other time I was out on the, but literally maybe 30 some miles that I was on the trail, and that to me was a true adventure, and I think that's what kind of captivated me. I read all of the history and the accounts and the thru hikers who like Scott Williamson was a huge inspiration, yo-yoing the Pacific Crest Trail, and then of course helping David Horton on his attempt. That really just kind of like spurred me to want to try one of these. And I knew at some point I had to find a time in my career when it made sense. And I think having the wisdom and having the base, because I think that's why I bounced back from the injury, was having that base of my body knew how to heal itself while I was still moving. I was walking and not running for 2 days, but it made sense to do at this point in my career. And like I said, I was super inspired by everybody that went before me, including Jen, and including Andrew Thompson, and including Pete Palmer. I mean, these individuals inspired me to like, okay, what can I do on the Appalachian Trail?
Yeah.
It's cool too that the whole thru hiking culture really started on the Appalachian Trail. That was a unique element too. I wanted to experience that. Maybe I was moving with a different strategy, longer days, a little bit faster when I could run, but I had thru hikers join me sometimes for 5 miles, up to 18 miles. And that was a lot of fun just to experience as much as I could without, unfortunately, sleeping at shelters and hanging out with them and enjoying.
So you were joining with the thru hikers at points. I mean, you were one of them.
Yeah.
Did you get a trail name?
I went by El Venado. Caballo Blanco gave me that trail name when I was down in the Copper Canyon, just because I would get time to converse with them, and I would sign in at logbooks at the shelters, and I talked to thru hikers on the trail, but I never got the opportunity, or maybe they didn't get the opportunity to know like a personality trait or something that okay, you're this. But towards the end of the trip, I did have a thru hiker call me the web walker. So because I was clearing spider webs basically in the morning, and then I was also clearing spider webs at night because they were already putting them up. So I was out on the trail 9, 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock and beyond, and there were spiders out there already. So
you were doing a service to the other thru hikers.
Exactly. It was one of those things where it seemed fitting. So web walker I guess would be my second trail name, or maybe my given trail name. Yeah.
A tradition with FKTs is getting in touch with the person who holds the record if you have an intention to go for it.
Yeah.
Did you get in touch with Jennifer Farr Davis beforehand?
Yeah. So Jen and I have known each other. I wrote a blurb for her book. I've gotten to like hang out and talk to her, partly at Outdoor Retailer here. And again, have had immense respect, because everybody's like, it's amazing, and it truly is amazing. I think what she did on that trail, and I was reminded of it all the time. And so I left her a message. We actually didn't get to speak, but we exchanged voicemails before I started. And I really kept it on the down low before I started. I didn't want a lot of hype beforehand. I wanted to share the experience while I was out there, but I didn't want this big, to do and like too much talk beforehand. I just wanted to like go down and do it. So I called her a couple days. Unfortunately, we just exchanged voicemails. But excited to like catch up with her and just kind of share war stories, I guess.
Were there, did you ever feel like you were racing her? I mean, because you knew the record out there. It was in your mind.
Oh yeah. I mean, the thing with doing an FKT or having a goal pace for any endeavor. So for a lot of people out there, maybe they're not breaking the records, maybe not winning, but they have a goal, and that goal for me was to see how fast I could go. I felt like a lot of people, we all think records can be pushed further, and Jen's I knew was going to be a very stout record to beat, but it was something pulling me a long way. I mean, I don't think I would have gotten 2 hours of sleep the last 3-4 nights if that record wasn't looming over me. And I didn't know until really essentially the base of Katahdin in that last 5 miles that I could break it. I mean, it was in the balance throughout so many points. I mean, 7 days in, it was like, record's gone.
Yeah.
31 miles today. I walked 37 miles the next day, and then 39 miles the following day. At that point, I'd already lost a day on my pace. I still was on record pace potentially, but again, going northbound too was an unknown element. I didn't, I knew how she had performed going south, along with, there's accounts of Andrew's attempt, but going north was another element. So it was always this thing of, it was driving me forward and pushing me to like maybe go harder, faster, and also longer. I just spent more and more time on the trail. That's where sleep became kind of thrown out the window. It's like I couldn't waste any more time.
So you had a down point when you injured your leg. Did you have another one when you saw yourself fall below her pace? Because what seemed like was slower than her pace, like a week to go, and you were moving from afar. It looked like you were moving pretty slower than you were earlier.
Yeah, I mean, I had, because all through Virginia, Pennsylvania, I was gaining ground. I, essentially gained back a day, and I was putting in huge days, 59, 58, 56, continuously, and, I was really feeling good. And then all of a sudden I get to Vermont, and record rainfall, the trail conditions, as hard as they normally are, just got that much harder. And I started having to spend longer on the trail in Vermont, and that set me up for, I was still on my, calculated days, but I was out there longer. And so the sleep deprivation, along with having a stomach bug for like 2-3 days where I just wasn't feeling right, my energy was lower, felt a little feverish, that hit me right at that point when I was sleep deprived, going slower in Vermont. So now all of a sudden I go into the hardest point, New Hampshire and Vermont. I'm sorry, New Hampshire and Maine, just at even a lower. And that's when things fell apart and I lost so much time. Tried, staying on pace, did a 26-hour day. And at that point, just the sleep deprivation was adding up. And it was a huge blow to now all of a sudden I lost, all that ground I'd made up. And now it was like a matter of hours or, potentially not even breaking the record. And at one point I remember in Maine, I think 5 days before I finished, I was just telling, Jenny, I was telling my buddy Timmy, it's gone. Like I screwed up. I should have, changed my strategy and just, killed a day and just gotten better rest and sleep and just, and then, so you like think through your mind, like I could have done things differently and feel like it's gone, but I'm going to get to Katahdin. And then of course I had some other friends come in and say, no, you're going to get this record. You're just not going to sleep.
You talk about the sleep deprivation, but as somebody who's known you for a long time and seen you when you're very fit, you looked absolutely wasted. Like you're a skinny guy to begin with, but it was from an outsider just seeing pictures, it was scary. Like, did somebody like Jenny or your other friends come to you and like with worry or?
Yeah, I mean, definitely people made a lot of comments, and Jenny would follow it a little bit more, and she's like, people think, and friends who had come in, they had seen pictures of me before, knew what I looked like. That was probably the contrast. But again, endeavors like these, and I think because I had more photos on social media, more people like meeting, like, Andrew didn't have that happening. Jen didn't really have that happening as much. So I think if somebody had like taken a picture of them when they were like down at their worst, as well as like, the second half of an endeavor like that, you're gonna, same with Carl too, I think you're gonna get to a point, some people lose more weight. I'm 173, 175 pounds typically. When I'm really in like good 100-mile shape, I'm 165 to 162. But I came into this knowing I'm going to lose weight. I mean, it's, you're basically on your feet for 16, 18 and more hours a day. You're eating as much as you can. I'm putting in 3,000 calories of, all the Cliff products I could think of that are used. But then, I'm putting in 3,000 more calories at meal times, or like when I could get solid food and other food, smoothies and just tons of fat. But you're going to lose body weight. And I think for so many people, they're like, oh, it's scary. But I had enough to lose.
I mean, it's that's going to happen, but like, you were getting up to that line.
Well, and it is scary. I mean, when I would feel my back, and I'm like, oh, I can feel the vertebrae and like all these like bones that normally have a little bit layer of fat in between. But it's kind of like at that extreme. It's like even more than expeditions, because you have like rest days, or you have times where you're sitting in a tent. For me, there were no down days for the most part. I had to either, put in longer days, get less sleep, and just spend more time on the trail. And that's gonna deplete you, but I'm bouncing back.
You're bouncing back.
Like people say I'm looking a little bit more.
You do. You look healthy now. You didn't look healthy.
And I don't have like facial hair accentuating like my cheekbones that are starting to show a little bit more and things like that. So but there are some scarier like photos where I'm just like, whoa, I was really
and you watch the sleep deprived, you kind of like
And I've never seen myself at 153 pounds. That was kind of crazy. So
So you get to the base of Katahdin. You have a couple hours to go. You're gonna make it. Is that when a wave of emotion hits you, or is it the whole climb, or is it hitting the top? When do you start to get that elation?
I think definitely it was at the base, but also, I mean, with the sleep deprivation and just like emotionally, I'm on a roller coaster leading into it. But definitely like getting like the really big turning point was getting from Abel Bridge to Baxter State Park and basically the approach trail, because that was going to be 10 miles of kind of unknown. People said, oh, it's good running, but I'd also heard it was good running at other points when it wasn't. So but it actually turned in where I did that in 2 hours and 40 minutes, and that was a huge changeover from going 1 to 2 miles an hour previously, the night before. So that was a turning point, getting there, knowing like, okay, I have a cushion here. And it was Jenny's birthday, and we're like, we're just going to go for a birthday hike with a bunch of friends. And I had a few folks that were helping me in Maine that were just local trail runners that were super supportive, and very thankful to have them. And I had my other buddies, Chrissy was out, Chrissy Mail and Topher Gaylord and Kim Gaylord. And so people that had seen me those last 4 or 5 days, it was just like this big, I guess kind of like a Sunday birthday hike that we were going on. And that was kind of cool, even though I was like totally spent, totally sleep deprived. The adrenaline kind of kicked in, and I just like went up that climb at a nice solid pace, but just hanging out with my friends. And that was, I think, one of the most memorable points as far as like savoring that, just not being like pushed to the edge of like, okay, I've got to, get every little second on this climb. That would have been rough. Like people you're like, whoa, is it going to be like that much of a nail biter? But it was like down to just a few hours.
But you weren't pushing it for every second. Once you knew you were there.
Yeah, I wasn't. It needed to be a steady pace. But anybody who's climbed Katahdin knows that, it's like full on at times climbing moves, and there's a stretch there of a mile where it's really rugged. So you're like, stemming between rocks and, grabbing onto like metal hooks that are screwed into the rock. And it's not just like a nice switchback trail. You're just going straight up this mountain face. And to do that, and know that I didn't have to like make every second count. I could just do a solid pace and just steady up to the top. And it was pretty surreal. And, seeing the summit, and people had been up there waiting for me because of course they could follow on the tracker and know. And it was neat to see, it was just really a fun kind of culmination of events. And there was a trail work crew out there. I remember they were all like celebratory. I got to like talk to them for a second. So I wasn't like forced to be like, on like point and on target. And I think that's what the whole journey, sometimes Carl was joking with me because he came out and crewed for 2 weeks, and he's like, you got to stop taking photos, you got to like stop talking to people, and different approaches. So for me, I wasn't, taking the approach of like every second counted throughout the whole run. And maybe that got me into trouble. Maybe it was not the best strategy, but for me, it was the experience I wanted to have.
But also, does that give you positive emotional feedback,
that's the thing, like where does the line? And I think there's different styles to doing a record attempt or even a through hike. You can run hike it, you can hike it, there's different approaches, and I think that's what I love about it too. You can go north, you can go south, and I did some maybe things that weren't the best strategy.
Like going south to north?
Yeah, exactly. As I realized once I got up to it, and if I had seen New Hampshire and Maine, I would have been like, I got to get this over with. Or I may have been like, let's do the Pacific Crest Trail or some other trail, because it really blew me away how difficult the trail. And I think that's, mad props to the East Coast runners as well as the Northeast, even Pennsylvania. It was really fun to not know what was coming ahead, but it was also demoralizing sometimes, especially when I got to New Hampshire. I was just, I knew it was going to be tough. I'd seen photos, but when I was actually on there, I was like, wow, this was maybe, I should have gone southbound. But for me, it was about aesthetics. I wanted to experience the trail the way most through hikers go. Ideally, it would have been, running, walking with spring, but that was the time of the year that I could do it. And it was an unreal and surreal experience. I wouldn't trade it for anything. It's hard to think like, could I have done things differently? Because for me, it was like, I wanted to do some things a certain way, and I had a great experience. Again, thanks to all the people who are out there supporting me, because it was a blast.
So you had Carl out there, and he's given a couple goes at the AT. And, record attempts, and I'm sure that people like him and other people will go for your record. Like, it's weird having that target on your back, and it's not just like one day a year when you had the Western States record. You're like, who's going to run fast this day? Like,
for me, I guess I've been at the sport long enough to know. Records are made to be broken, and for me, if somebody broke it this year, hats off to them, and I'd be psyched. For me, just to do what I did and accomplish, whether I've broken the record, just getting through the injuries, getting through the challenges of making to Katahdin is a feat, much like for a lot of through hikers, because there's so many things that can happen. You can get an injury that takes you out of the game. You can get sick. Some through hikers have to leave the trail. So for me, somebody breaking it's not like I put the bar up way high. It was only by a few hours, but Carl would tell me it's a stout record regardless, what Jennifer did and even what Andrew did. But there's always going to be somebody along the way who's going to push the bar up further. And I think it definitely can be done. Again, with a record attempt like that and a through hike that's so long, things are going to happen. But if everything were to go right, I think people could take, maybe a couple days off the record. But again, things have to go right. And
that's a long time.
Chances are there's going to be some things that are going to go wrong enough to where you're going to have to take some lower mileage days. It's just kind of natural. I think everybody experiences that, but somebody might get lucky where the stars align, the weather's perfect, the trail conditions are perfect, and we'll see. So I think that's what's fun about it. So I look forward to it.
As you were talking earlier, like, you have perspective now. Maybe more than you do when you run at Western States, at least the first couple. You're 41, right?
Mm-hmm.
You probably think about your place in running a little bit more. You had 7 Western States wins. You won a couple Spartathlons in a row. You had the 24-hour record. You have this. Like, was this a exclamation point at the end of your career? And like, where does it rank in that sort of pantheon of achievements?
I mean, for me, it ranks up there as like, I think one of the best. I may have at times been the worst experience, and that was so difficult, so tough. But for me to get through what I did, as well as with Jenny, because it is a team effort. I mean, having the support crew and having all the people from Carl to Chrissy to my friends that came out and supported me was kind of makes it even more special. So definitely not only the hardest challenge, but something that really ranks up there is like, maybe not an exclamation mark, but it is like something I will remember for the rest of my life. And there's just so many experiences, so many challenges, and it's really like this epic adventure in a way versus like a race. It was just about like going out there and seeing, how my body as well as my mind can deal with all the challenges. So yeah, it's definitely an adventure like that and that's, I think, kind of like sums up why I do this sport, because I want to be out there in the woods and the mountains, challenging myself and just being open to adversity and what it might throw at him. How do I deal with that?
Does it inspire you to do anything else in that vein, whether as a very fast attempt or, going out with Jenny for a week on the JMT or something?
Yeah, well, we definitely want to do the whole Pacific Crest Trail and like dedicating the time. Like sometimes I was out there like, gosh, we could have just done the Pacific Crest Trail in 3 to 4 months and taken this time, and I dedicated it a month of like, this fast pace and having all the support with her and a lot of logistics. But at the end of the day, I'm glad I had that experience, but I'm looking forward to just doing some adventure runs as well as hikes and not have that pressure, because I think a lot of people assume that, okay, that's what I'm all about all the time.
Yeah.
Some of the hiking communities like, oh, he didn't get to enjoy it. But the great thing is, we do different paces, we do different challenges for different reasons, and for this adventure, I wanted to push those boundaries, and I knew I was going to suffer, I knew it was going to hurt, I knew it was going to take a lot of demands from a support crew, and the next time I go out and do something, it'll be, self-supported and carrying everything on my back, and love to do that. I mean, I think that's the great thing is, as ultra runners and trail runners, we do different events, different challenges for different reasons, and we do them at different speeds and different, approaches. And we can have fun no matter which way we do it. Some we just have to, like I said, there's some elective suffering going on there.
You mentioned some of the hikers sort of like, wondering about you getting to enjoy the experience. I know when Carl did it, there was some pretty vocal people and vitriolic people really about, you're not doing it the right way. Did you get any of that or hear of that while you were out on the trail? Or
for the most part, it was really cool to see how supportive. I mean, 99% of the thru hikers out there were, and maybe people say, well, they were mostly young, but I actually had people of all ages who were super psyched. They were following on Instagram, they were following on social media. It's crazy because like the AT gets so much reception, whereas on certain trails you don't get that feed. So they were following it along, and like I said, the cool thing is they joined me. I had one guy run with a 30-pound pack for 18 miles with me, and he was like, he sent me a message on Facebook saying, that was the coolest part of the trip, or one of his highlights. And even though he like crumpled up in like discomfort after, and was like, but some people would come along and join me, and I think that's like a testament to most people. And there's always going to be people who don't. Maybe the approach I had maybe was different than what they feel is the true ethos of the trail. But again, a lot of times I was moving as fast, or as some people maybe they would say as slow as thru hikers.
The same speed.
And not any necessarily faster. I ran when I could run, but a lot of times I was moving, at 3 miles an hour, sometimes less, 2 miles an hour. And maybe I didn't carry, my home on my back and that sort of part, but I just was out there longer. And again, Jen Farr Davis, she's an avid thru hiker, has done the trail where she carried everything, but she also did 2 record attempts. And I think you just have different experiences, and one isn't necessarily better than the other. Just choosing different styles and at different points. So I feel like I enjoyed the trail as well as took in the trail just as much as anyone else. In fact, some might argue, well, I was running at night and hiking at night, when a lot of people have called it good at 7, 8 o'clock.
And only see the trail during the day.
During the day. And I saw it because a lot of times, I'd see through hikers hunker down. It was just pouring down rain and huge storms, and I'd be out there having to put miles in. So I think I experienced, the full range of things. It's just more compacted. Saw the wildlife, picked up the little red F lizards that were on the ground that are 2 inches long. I mean, you see and feel and smell things much like any other through hiker. So I think it's unfortunate when there's this battle of what is the true way, or how fast should you go? Is there a speed limit for the Appalachian Trail, and is there a certain ethic? I think the main ethic is that we travel lightly on the land, and we all respect the land. We also encourage others to do the same, and encourage more people to get out and explore wild places, whether that means half mile an hour or 3, 4, 5 miles an hour running. We're all like foot travel users. That's what I think is kind of funny, but there's really no argument there.
I mean, speaking of rules and stuff, was it a buzzkill? You finish, you have your experience, your birthday with Jenny, you finish, you set the record, and then shortly thereafter, the whole Baxter State Park thing happens.
Yeah, I mean, it's unfortunate that, an individual or group of individuals had to I don't know. I think they just again used. I've said this in my own blog. It's just what really happened. I described that. So without going into detail, I just feel it's unfortunate that somebody used my experience to stomp all over it. Basically, stand on my shoulders and say, "Here's the bone we have to pick with the Appalachian Trail thru hikers," and they've obviously had a big beef against them in the past, and there's a long
and you were the soapbox.
History. Yeah, and I was basically, let's take this guy. He's not doing it the way that we like it, and he's also doing the things the thru hikers do that we don't like.
Yeah.
Although it was just a couple of things. They have this long list of things they don't like, but so I think it's unfortunate that it was used in that way. Whereas we could have done something like, hey, you probably shouldn't have champagne at the top.
And you would have been put it back in the backpack.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. Why not do it that way? Or why not work with me to be like, hey, let's let the rest of the, I don't know how many more thru hikers. I mean, I was 40-something on the finish list for 2015, so there was going to be another 600 to 700, 800 thru hikers that were going to finish. Why not send a message of like, hey, guys, save the party for later, somewhere else, not the top of Katahdin. But instead it was, there was no education behind it. It was just, trying to take me down a notch. And again, I'm super happy with my accomplishment. Maybe things could have gone differently at the very end, and maybe an organization like Baxter State Park could have chose a different route.
Yeah.
But anybody who knows me and knows what I stand for, I'm not gonna desecrate wilderness, or I'm not gonna have some party at the top. And again, I couldn't control who showed up at the top of the mountain.
Yeah, I mean,
and to say that I had more than the group size. I mean, really, I followed the rules, but they got me on a couple nuances, and want to try to.
Littering was literally champagne on the rocks.
Yeah. So again, here's the.
I mean, I guess if somebody discreetly pees on the side of Katahdin, is that littering?
It's like liquid. I mean, people spill sports drinks, or maybe they bring soda at the top. Is that littering? And again, we're getting into details, but
yeah, I know. So yeah,
you have Tommy Caldwell and Kevin Jorgensen at the top of Half Dome on a national park and national wilderness. They crack 2 bottles of champagne. Champagne's going all over, and the Park Service does nothing. But Baxter State Park decides to again.
So maybe it's a good lesson for everybody to maybe think about what they're doing and how it can be perceived. Whereas,
sure, yeah. I mean, if there was, again, if I felt, again, I was not to say that just because I was sleep deprived and all these things, but one of my crew members had asked a couple park rangers at the bottom, like, hey, I have a couple bottles of champagne. Is it okay if have them? They're like, yeah, just keep it away from kids and family. So, it's one of those things where I didn't think I was breaking any rules, but again, if I had, we could have easily sent a better message to individuals. But in terms of the perception of people, again, I don't think having social media involved and letting people track my journey getting people inspired to explore the outdoors is a bad thing. Some people, I have this really extreme view of conservationism where they'd rather have no humans, walk on any of the land and just let it return to like normal. But to me, humans have been walking the earth for eons, and getting more people to understand the value of those places and doing it in a fashion that doesn't have a huge impact.
Yeah, I mean,
really
if you don't have people on the trails or experiencing the wilderness, who's going to protect the wilderness?
Exactly, and where there's the value. And, a lot of land, including Baxter State Park. Baxter State Park, a lot of people don't realize this, a lot of logging occurs. They have snow machines run through there in the winter. So if you're going to complain about, a little Champagne Little Rocks, you've got to look at some other
Look at some
issues.
priorities, yeah.
So, again, it's semantics, and it's unfortunate.
Was the ATC pretty supportive of?
It's been mixed from the Appalachian Trail Conservancy. I'm a member, even on being in the Rockies. I've been a member for a lot of years with the Appalachian Trail Conservancy. I try to support, basically the National Scenic Trail organizations. And it was amazing when I went through Harpers Ferry, all these employees came out and ran with me, and interns.
Really?
They were really psyched about the whole thing until the whole issue of like Baxter State Park and where that kind of follows in line. And so I think they've kind of taken a stance, a pretty hardline stance, which I think is kind of unfortunate, but I get it. It's all politics, and where it's going to go, but it's hard to say. I mean, really, again, I think it'd be a shame for them to move the terminus, and the Appalachian Trail Conservancy is obviously working on that. And I would find it hard to believe that, again, the state of Maine is very supportive of the Appalachian Trail.
Yeah.
It's just a couple of individuals whose viewpoint is different.
That's interesting. I mean, it's such tradition in history. It's Katahdin, like.
Yeah, it is, and I think again, it's just like, why don't we work together? And I think the Appalachian Trail Conservancy is trying to work with Baxter State Park as well as work with the different organizations and land management.
I mean, I think if the issue got out far enough, like one thing I read was Baxter State Park saying we don't have enough funds that are commensurate with the use of the AT through hikers.
Well,
but people could raise, like, if that became the issue, there's enough people that care enough about the AT and Katahdin being the finish that make it happen.
Yeah. Well, and I don't know. I'd almost have to argue, because a lot of people, they have family members or friends that pay entrance fees to hike with them to the top when they finish. And so I don't know really how much, that's the thing. Like, Baxter State Park would really have to show us that there's a really financial burden on the park and resource burden, because we're still talking about numbers of people that probably bring money into the park. And like you said, there's other ways of solving that issue. I just really highly doubt. I mean, again, all the thru hikers that I met, I mean, they're out there experiencing the trail and they want to take care of it too. I mean, I think they're just as close to nature as individuals who are sitting in offices and trying to manage the park. And even if you look at the great conservationists and those that encourage us to get out, from John Muir to others, their whole thing was like, you got to be out in nature. And to me, a thru hiker is the epitome of that, because they're out there day after day after day. So I would think they have just as much appreciation, if not more, than any other individual who's out day hiking. So it's kind of unfortunate, because like, what pressures do the day hikers put on the trails and the resources?
Probably the same number of feet.
Yeah. So, again, we should be working together and doing things in a positive way. And I think all people can enjoy the wilderness in the way that they need to, within the bounds of like impact.
And you've already been out in the wilderness again. I can't believe, like.
Well, it was a little forced active recovery, but it was good to be out there. A little bit like, psychologically shell-shocked from the whole experience. I don't know if I was ready to like put in 18 miles a day, but it was a good way to.
So you just out with Ricky Gates's Hut Run Hut?
Yeah, I did a couple days on his Hut Run Hut trip, and it was great to be in the Rockies and back on like the home trail, so to speak. That's Aspen, but great group of folks and great way to experience. And it's a unique luxury to be able to go from hut to hut in Colorado or anywhere in the U.S. So it was a lot of fun.
And
I enjoyed it.
What was the biggest challenge? Are your legs beat up, your feet beat up? Is it energy level? What's challenging you right now?
I think the biggest thing for me is I feel like I've bounced back from the sleep deprivation plan. I got up on sleep, and my body's still trying to recover, and I know it's going to take many weeks, if not months. The biggest thing were my feet being really sore. They survived the trip amazingly well. considering. And Carl was always just blown away. He's like, your feet are money, man. He's like, I don't know what you're doing. He's like, your feet are so good, because he's been on the other side of the table.
Right off the
so
bat.
it's neat to like see him have that perspective. But then after I finish, they're just so like deep down sore. And I think sometimes when you take the pressure off of them, it's like, whoa, now you notice, like not doing those miles. And then my legs just in general, I don't have anything like injury wise. It's just deep down soreness. And moving them feels good somewhat, but then other days it's like I don't want to like do too much. So I've been trying to like get on the bike a little bit, spin around town.
But energy wise, you didn't have any, like, you weren't like 10 miles into one of these days and
not.
I just want to walk the flat now.
Well, I definitely did a bunch of walking.
Okay.
So I brought up the rear and was the walkie-talkie in the back, like making sure people were
you were sweeping.
Yeah, exactly. Which totally fine. Early part of the days, I tried to like join the front group and with them, but yeah, it was a blast. It's a blast to be back out and just not have a schedule, not have like a place I need to be, and like, you know, be on that kind of mode.
So when you're running a 100-miler, there's usually waves of emotion. Like toward the end of 100, like people can well up at the randomest thing. Did you get any of that emotion, like waves of emotion, I guess is the way I'd put it?
I definitely did. Yeah, I definitely did. I had moments where, like, again, you can be, you know, just amazingly, you know, most joyful person, and then, you know, rock bottom, just like, you know, I shared some tears with Jenny a couple times where I'm just like, you know, this is too hard for you, it's too much, you know, let's just go home, let's just call it good. And you have those moments where you're just like, this is just, you know, too much. But then you like bounce back, and you know, she was like, no, we're gonna finish this thing. So it's you have to have the emotions and you have to recognize them versus just ignore it, because, you know, it wasn't one of those things where you just put your head down all the time.
Did you ever go numb that way, like either at the very end where you're just pushing, or in the middle where you're just like days where you're just flat?
I had some flat-ish days, but the emotions come up. I mean, even when I was like so sleep deprived, I would, you know, tell my crew, like, I remember one time, you know, they were like, you know, you get 1 hour sleep here, and I was like, no way. I thought you guys said I get like a decent sleep, which means 2 to 3 hours, like a little bit more. And no, it's just 1 hour. And I'm like, they're crazy. I told Jenny, don't wake me up. Like, just let me sleep for 2 to 3 hours. And so, like, even though like I was like sleep deprived and flat and just kind of like a robot of like doing what I needed to do, I still had that ability to like spike my emotion and be like, you know, no way. But in
you're
the
still
end,
feeling.
Like, still feeling it, definitely. So
on the gear side of things, kind of what was your daily, what was your setup like from the outset?
Some of the biggest things I used, I mean, I went through a total of 8 pairs of shoes. I used, my shoe of choice was the Pure Grit, and I used some Pure Grit 3s and Pure Grit 4s throughout the trip. I wore a little bit of the Cascadia to mix things up, try that a bit, but that was like the main shoe choice. The one thing that I did do, like a lot of people are surprised with like how good my feet. I'm a big fan of using unpetroleum jelly. It's a non-petroleum based product, and just would lube my feet every morning, whether my feet were going to be dry or wet, because sometimes I'm putting on wet shoes. You know, it's just the way it is on the AT with pouring down rain, and then just water all over the trail. I used trekking poles the whole time. I never had them, you know, like never left them at the van for any stretch.
No.
I never really collapsed them.
You basically
except
had your
for
poles
like
in your
on some
hand.
of the technical sections, and I had some people that were, you know, running with me and, you know, supporting me along the way, and sometimes I would hand, you know, the full length. But I used some Black Diamond Z poles that I've been using for years, and I broke a couple falling on them, you know, and just like, you know, went through, you know, basically 2 that I'd broken. But for the most part, I never had them further away from, you know, me for a few stretches. So it was, they were a huge help. And a lot of times I was using them to like brake on the downhill. So because I was putting in so many miles, so much elevation gain and loss, that I was actually using them to brake on the downhill, so I wasn't beating up my quads. So it's a little different strategy for like a through hike and on FKT. You're trying to save your quads, and downhills you're not trying to just bomb down them all the time.
But even if somebody doesn't have the chance to train as much as they'd like descending, if they live in a New York City or Philadelphia or whatever and can't get the hill training for a 100-miler, you could actually use poles
to minimize the force. So I was using them not only in the uphills extensively, because the AT is so steep. I was using them on downhills, using them also for balance. So like when I was like almost pretty much falling asleep in some of these later stretches. I was like using them as balance. They were like crutches. I also, when I had the injury, trying to minimize the impact so that while I was walking downhill, I was still recovering. Those, that 37-mile day, that 39-mile day where I just walked continuously. Other things, I used a new Ultimate Direction vest. That'll be the new SJ Ultra Vest. So I started with a version 2.0.
And then Protos came back on the
basically was able to get some Protos along the way, and actually using some new fabrics. And a lot of people were surprised, like, what is that thing you're wearing? And didn't have any logos until the last week when they had one with a logo. But that worked amazingly well. Another thing I worked, which I think a lot of trail runners should look into, is the Sawyer inline water filter. It's about 3 ounces.
Okay.
And I use typically a lot of bottles and throughout my racing career, but for this trip, I used a bladder almost extensively, except when I wanted to have, say, a bottle of electrolyte drink. Occasionally, I would throw some Cliff electrolyte drink in one, or I would throw like a smoothie or like a dense kind of like coconut milk kind of drink. Or I was doing a lot of these Cocacino, basically latte coconut milk drinks. I get some calories, but also get some caffeine. So that was kind of nice to have that ability. But the filter, I think, worked amazingly well.
So you were able to just dip and...
So I was able to just basically fill up my bladder, and because the AT has so much water, I was using really just a 1 liter bladder a lot of times. I was trying to avoid carrying too much water weight. I carried a DeLorme InReach Explorer tracker, in which a lot of people, that's 6 ounces. And for the most part, I carried, all of my, equipment, except in the stretches of like New Hampshire, Maine, where I actually had to have camping gear because I slept on the trail. A lot of people don't realize that. They think I just slept in the van the whole time, but I was fortunate enough to have some locals from New Hampshire and Maine who helped out. The days that I had to sleep either at shelters or on the trail, including at the very end, sometimes it was a half-hour little cat nap, but Topher and Chrissy basically carried my little thermarest.
Gotcha.
They had the night shift.
And extra food too, because if you can't get your equipment, like the 100-mile wilderness.
Yeah, and there was enough where I had enough support. Again, a lot of days, especially early on, it was just Jenny and I out in Virginia. And I would go 25 miles carrying all the food I would need, be able to filter water, because I didn't want her driving down some of these crazy dirt roads, and some of them were just not as accessible. So a lot of times, I was carrying everything I would need except for that camping gear, and it worked really well to be able to filter the water so I didn't have to carry so much water weight. And then food-wise, I was using, pretty much, I tried to total it up as like 4,000 Cliff products between, Cliff blocks, Cliff gels.
I saw a picture of like stuff Jenny had salvaged from your pack or whatever.
Oh yeah, we were like, recycling. She would send it back to TerraCycle to be recycled. So we were, again, trying to do everything. I mean, I hauled out, every scrap of toilet paper that I'd used actually, and hauling that out.
So
I wasn't leaving it. Yeah, I wasn't leaving it or digging it, down into the hole, which a lot of animals dig up. So really trying to be as minimal as possible in terms of my impact. And I would highly recommend, if you're going to do one of these, like the most plushest toilet paper. I'm a fan of like using whatever you have to use on the trail sometimes, but like, there's some things where like, again, managing chafing issues, that is so key, because there were times in the South when I started, like Jenny was like, what is happening to your skin? Because you have this high humidity, you're in rain, you're in sweat. It's just, you're trying to manage all that.
So with that in mind, like, were there any apparel pieces that you, like, are your favorite pieces normally, and you're just like, after a week of it, I can't wear this shirt anymore? Or,
there's nothing.
That's not like an apparel issue, but it's just...
mean from a psychological...
Or for psychological, or like chafing, or just...
I still, like, even though like some of these pieces I wore all the time, like I wore it the other day when I was out with Ricky on the Hut Run Hut. I had this... basically this Brooks HVAC shirt that I've had for years, and Jenny put a zipper in it. So it was an old Brooks piece, but she had put a zipper basically that almost zipped down like 3/4 of the length, and it would just allow for ventilation, and I used that along with like arm warmers a lot of the time. And there really wasn't anything where I'm like, I can't wear that ever again. I mean, again, I wore things that I knew were tested by myself, and then I also tried some new things along the way that I really fell in love with, or like this, but I never had anything where I'm like, can't touch that. Even food wise, it's kind of crazy. I think I would like be so burnt out on certain things, like I can't eat, another chocolate cherry double caffeine Cliff gel, and actually I just did one the other day and it was not a problem. So you'd think you'd get burnt out on things. The only things I really which was really cool. Some people would bring out food, and some of the things I could eat. Some things I was just like, I just can't do something like a nut energy bar right now, even though they were homemade and like so.
It looks so good.
Yeah, exactly. And then the things I craved, of course, were like the vegan donuts people would bring out, or like these. I remember
maybe ice cream treats or ice cream like
like basically coconut milk ice cream was like a way of getting 800 calories in one shot.
I remember like stories of Horton getting people running out ice cream
and there's this group in it was right around in Pennsylvania. They basically brought out popsicles on dry ice, and things like that, something cold when it was 90 degrees out and humidity. So it was a lot of fun to have that kind of.
Does that taste all the sweeter? Did you know they brought dry ice and popsicles?
Yeah, exactly. No, it was really neat. And again, with the AT having that trail magic that exists, but then also because people were following along and knew where I was and bringing food out. There was a family in another part of Pennsylvania that brought out all these, fresh fruit and all these meat substitutes, like fake meats, essentially vegan meat, and that was a way to get like extra protein. And it was super cool because they brought Jenny 2 grocery bags full of all this food, and because that was a hard thing too, of like her managing. I mean, she had the toughest job of driving into these towns and trying to find food, and sometimes it was fast food hash browns for breakfast that she could get, because we brought as much food as we could, but sometimes she wasn't able to make things just with a time commitment. She's doing laundry, she's having to like get gas, get ice. It was just a constant. So
you guys built out that van, right?
Yeah, from like scratch in 5 days. We didn't have a lot of time. Ideally, we would have had more time. And people think, oh, you had all this like crazy, support. We did it on our own, but with the help of friends who would come out and help us out. But it was, definitely. I was, to this day, like Jenny was just a rock star in what she did, because it's really tough to find somebody who's going to like hang out with you and do what she did, which is a full-time job of like support group.
Were you ever sort of miserable to be around? I know I would be.
I think, maybe some people caught me at like maybe a low moment, but I would say overall, I really tried to be the Scott Jurek most people see, but I would tell people when they were running, like, I might not say anything right now, or sometimes, like a crew member who was running with me say, hey, let's give Scott a little space. He's like, needing some like quiet time here. He's like a little too like sleep deprived to like, answer questions or like, engage in a conversation. And other times I'd be, totally like, talking about, stuff and having full conversation. So it really kind of ebbed and flowed, but I say overall it was
kept it together.
I didn't have any like crazy.
You didn't have 3 or 4 days where you were just
where I was just
snapping.
Like, snapping at everybody. I mean,
because no one would fault you for that, because
I mean, you have like Jenny and I mean, we had arguments, and you have like, and that's natural. And so, especially with a partner or spouse, if you can survive something like the AT, you can survive pretty much anything, because it's like putting your relationship in a pressure cooker. And hoping, things.
Well, she's here in Salt Lake, so
exactly.
Things turned out all right.
She's still sticking by. And like I said, we had a great time together too, even though there was a lot of work involved. I mean, it was a job, day in and day out. But we're really excited to just run and hike on the trails and not have this like goal time.
Did it feel like there was another like week or two of nonstop action after you stopped? But
there was some
NPR and
managing some of it. Anyway, it was great that there was interest from the media. It wasn't like that wasn't the reason I did it, but people were really inspired by it, and so that was a little bit harder, because it wasn't like I got all this downtime. Now it was like
you just probably wanted to sleep.
Dealing with, but again, it's who I am, and kind of just like I'm one of these individuals, like hard worker, and just like go for it. And but I'm looking forward to some like downtime back at home. We've only had like a week home. I mean, we like had to drive back from the East Coast and all those things.
And now you're outdoor retailer show.
Exactly.
When you head out, and when you have your vacation or your chill.
The next 2 weeks is like being at home and catching up on home stuff a little bit, of course, but just trying to like have some downtime. But looking forward to it. And then I'm headed to France for UTMB to do some speaking and that sort of thing, but not racing, so it'll be in a different position.
Have some good food. And
exactly.
Maybe some good wine.
Different perspective of UTMB. So
awesome. Well, congratulations
thanks, Brian.
on the accomplishment. Thank you so much for taking the time.
Thanks for everybody out there who supported me. It was a real, quite an adventure. I couldn't have done it without just the little bit of, the comments and the support. It was, like I said, something I'll always remember, and really want to thank people for being supportive out there.
Awesome. Perfect. We have 11 minutes of